And we're back with some Factorio. And it's been a while, like, say, a year or two since, well, I was trying to get a train base up and running, but, yeah, the time constraints combined with the lack of interest, I'm like, there was no point putting in another 80 hours when you'd only have, about 80 people watching. But I think this should be interesting enough. It's the completed base, but it's the old completed base. I had to actually revert the Factorio game back to an older version so this would work. I created this base before I ever made my first YouTube video. So, yeah, this is a bit of an oldie, but I think it demonstrates a lot of stupid design features that are quite fun. Let's maybe go through those. When it comes to making bases in Factorio, there's this generally predictable rhythm. You're going to make a base like this. It's sort of like a belt-fed base, and this is what you use to knock out all the basic early research. And then you either build a second base on top of this to prep for the building of your mega base, or you sort of expand this one out to help build your mega base. For example, down here, we are churning out Speed Module Mark 3s and Productivity Module Mark 3s. We need these for building our big-ass base. The problem is, you can only siphon so much resources out of your system. This base is not really designed for it. So either you divert as much as you can into this production of modules, which is a massive bottleneck for bases, or you build an entire separate base just to produce these. And this results in this horrible problem. You're building this massive base, but this massive base is not helping you build itself. It's just designed to produce science. That's the whole point of Factorio, is to burn all your resources to make science. Because, it is what it is. However, this base is very, very different. Okay, it's different in more than one way, let's just say. But this base is designed to actually help you build itself. You can convert all the production any way you want. And the whole trick behind it is this sort of train belt. There's this thing in Factorio called sushi belts. It's where you mix and match a bunch of stuff on a belt. We've done that, but with trains. This is a sushi train. Yeah, I think I got back into this because of Dave the Diver, to be honest. So we've got here iron ore, copper ore, coal. We've got empty barrels, fuel, blue chips, all this sort of stuff. And this is going around all on the same train. And there is 5 wagons on each one of these trains, and they've all got different junk in them. So first up, we're going to go to science production. How? How are we going to science production when we haven't actually done any of the basic production yet? Well, it's a circular base. So what happens here is, after we've actually produced all the science and gone past the science sections, then we're going to go on to the metal smelting, and the copper smelting, and the circuit production, because we don't need to worry about it. For example, you'll see all the iron ore is going to start getting offloaded. There you go. And we're going to start loading up on iron plate. Because it's a circular base, we don't have to care where we do any of the loading or unloading. And this leads to a whole bunch of interesting things you can do. Sushi belting is incredibly powerful. The problem is using it with transport belts is weak sauce, and using it with trains is incredibly time-consuming and complicated to figure out, because there's no real guidelines for doing it out there. And this is copper plate production, so now we're loaded up on copper plate. Once that's done, we move on. This is going to be circuit production, so they're going to rip out some copper plate, maybe a little bit of iron plate. Do you need any sulfuric acid here, or is that the next stop? Oh, actually a little bit of sulfuric acid, but I don't think they need anything this round. It takes very little. We actually carry the sulfuric acid around on the train so that we don't have to use pipes. Pipes are a little bit harder on the frames per second. And finally we get to green circuits, which we're now fully loaded up on. Then right back round to the start. These things can max out at about 300 kilometers per hour. They're all running on nuclear fuel. Once it gets around to the start again, it loads right back up on resources, basic resources. This doesn't even, we don't do any on-site smelting at the mines. This little circular loop does everything, and everything gets loaded onto these trains. The unloading here you'll see is from these extra long trains full of copper, iron, coal, and stone. It's all done around there. Now I'd like to go through one of the huge bonuses before we get into some of the more annoying complications. And that's over here. I call this a siphon. This is where you produce everything you need to expand a base. You see, this monstrosity here is a mall, but it's not like a normal mall. This thing can consume all the resources of this module. And by this module, I mean this 1/3 of these 6 bases. Well, okay, there's 1/3 of a 6 doesn't matter. Okay, it's 1/6 of a base. However, it's actually slightly more than that. If you'll check, there's sort of a contiguous logistical network that goes across all 3 of these bases, meaning all of 3 of these modules, all one after the other, are all connected, meaning you can do some dumb stuff. There's about 1,250 science per minute passing through these 3 modules, and all of them we can do this to them. We would like all the speed modules you've got. We'd also like all the productivity modules you've got. Also, let's crank that up really high. Yeah, that seems fine. And then we'll copy that and paste it into all of those. Perfect. And we can go into production. Now remember, this is an older version of the game, so this is going to be a little bit out of date in the looks department. There's speed modules Mark III and productivity modules Mark III. And we're going to watch those climb. In fact, where is space science as well? Space science is... There's this space science. I plugged it all in and I'm just... I've fast-forwarded time a wee bit. You'll notice here that speed modules Mark III and productivity modules Mark III, they just climbed right up to here, and then they're just flatlining all the way across. They're going to keep doing that. But you'll also notice that our science here is going through the floor. It hasn't quite cratered yet, but it will in a bit. If we chuck it down to the last minute, we're down to about 1300, it's halved, and it's going to keep getting worse. You see, this siphon is configured in a way that it's earlier on than the science production. So this basically has dibs on everything, and its appetite is extreme. It was designed so that it could consume all of the red and green and blue circuits that pass through here to make all of these modules. And as such, it basically eats everything. That's why it's called a siphon. If we go back in time for like 50 hours, you can see that there's this time period here of a few hours where we basically just redlined the grid producing speed and productivity modules to build up the other part of the base. As in, this half of the base over here needed, well, many thousands of speed and productivity modules, and this part of the base over here produced all of them. And did so incredibly quickly. There's something to be said for putting 1,500 science per minute of resources into productivity modules. But it's not just that. Let's just cancel these for a minute. You see, one of the other things you want when you're building up giant mega bases is, well, power. These things require awful amounts of power, especially the beacons and the module systems. It's so much. So you basically go with solar. Solar is the best way when you're building a mega base, because nuclear just takes up a little bit too much FPS, or it used to. Nuclear's gotten a lot better, but solar still works out cheaper in terms of how many frames per second you're going to lose. So the problem we face, though, is when you convert 1,250 science per minute into just nothing but solar panels and accumulators, it kind of leads to a deployment problem. How do you deploy that many solar panels quickly enough? The bottleneck is not the production anymore, the bottleneck is the deployment. So let's head over to this solar outpost and, yeah, I'll show you how it works. First up, though, we're going to have to turn something on. It'll make things look a bit ugly. Show tile grid. This is the grid system, and these are, well, they're called chunks. Each one of these blocks is called a chunk. And chunk aligning things makes building something so much simpler, especially when radar is required. Now, I did come out here earlier and install all these rails, but there was a whole blueprint system for it. I'll show that at the end. But once we're parked up, we're going to put that to manual for a second. This system is designed to, well, rip everything off and dump it into all these chests out here. The whole blueprint does everything automatically. The only things we have to do are, one, put in, say, 150 construction robots. You know what? Make it take all the construction robots, just all of them. Then what we do is we crack open the blueprints and we go with this chunk-aligned solar blueprint. And this thing here fits precisely in a 3x3 grid. And we just hold down Shift and we hit deploy. The rail system in here is designed to only take out solar panels and accumulators. It doesn't mess with any of the other things we deploy. And oh my god, I trapped myself. Okay, that was my bad. I can fix that. I am bizarrely proud of this deployment strategy. It's not perfect in terms of ratio, but what it is perfect in terms of is just deployment from a distance. Oh my god. Okay, you know what? Let's just grab a chunk-aligned one of these, and let's zoom in a bit there. Then we can just line that up just like that, and deploy. Oh wait, no, I have to hold on Shift. Been a while. You know what? And let's do one over here if you wouldn't mind. And let's do one down here. And you'll notice that these rails don't interfere with anything important. As in, the only thing that they knock out are solar panels and accumulators. They don't mess with any of the power grid stuff. So we're able to deploy this absolutely perfectly without regards for the rails. In the end, you can rip out the rails if you want, but, you know, why would you? In fact, am I lining this up correctly? There we go. So, this is going to start, but it's going to take a while for all of these to get deployed. There'll be problems with logistics robots and power stuff and all sorts of things. But what we want to do is grab this thing, and we're going to set it to active in a minute. But I thought I'd cover some of the other beautiful things here. See, back here, we have room for stone and wood. Any of the stone and wood that they find around the place gets dumped in here, put back on the train, and removed from the location. It covers everything. Took me a while to figure this all out. We'll put this on automatic. This thing comes all the way back home and drops off everything. Perfect. Then it's going to load right back up on solar panels. And if we've done this right, it's been a while since I've done this, you know, like a couple of years or so. Well, actually, God, it must be 3 or 4 years when I made this base. this is going to load back up and then go right back out. And if we've done it right, it should be able to completely drain this entire system of everything and deploy all the solar panels and all of those things just as quickly as we make them. I had entirely forgotten how quickly this builds. We need to maybe queue up an awful lot more of this solar stuff. One second. I had completely forgotten how much we overproduce solar panels. This thing is deploying at speed. I've stuck in 2,000 construction robots here, and this thing is deploying solar panels at an absolutely incredible rate. Unfortunately, we still can't stress the system. We get spikes. I then put down a second train. I realized I needed about 4 trains to keep up with the production. So you need 2 solar deployment sites, which is why there's like all these through here. But yeah, throwing down solar, very easy. And I messed up as well. If you look here, we are going to be 1, 2, 3. We're going to be 1 tile away from this. So, you know what? It's been a while since I've played Factorio. I know a long time since I played this base. So I'm sure to get some things wrong. But I am not unhappy with the way the solar panels worked out. Back in the day, I made an entire blueprint setup around that system. For example, here's the rails you use to get out from one location to the other, and they're all chunk aligned. There's the actual solar outpost that will contain 5 carriages, if you want to go with 4, 3, 2, or 1 carriage, depending on how big you want to make it. And there's the chunk aligned solar. This thing I spent way too many hours working on. I think between starting this up and finally finishing everything was about, 80 hours of in-game time. So yeah, I spent way too much time perfecting. Well, that's enough time going on about the solar, which I love way, way, way too much. This here is the unloading area, and that leads on to the key defining feature of this base. The single exit rail system. The whole plan here initially was I wanted to make something that ran on a single rail. That was it. I wanted to see how much you could cram across it. And that's how the entire rest of the base ended up coming to be. In fact, it also resulted in the map choice. This map is, it's basically limited on top to bottom. I think it's 2,000 tiles or something. It's a map type you can play. Some people like to play them really narrow. I decided to play it this way, so what I could do was, but basically, there's lots of biters around. You basically fight your way through. You kill all the biters, annihilate them all the way along, and then you're done. In fact, at the end, what I'm able to do is I can park an artillery train right here, and the artillery has enough range to reach all the way from one side of the map to the other. So you can just park up your artillery train, murder everything, drive your artillery train forward. You have to push through a bunch of biters, of course. Park up another artillery train and repeat. And you basically just have this blueprint that builds laser turrets all the way along and kills everything as you go. Saves so much time and effort. This would allow you to keep expanding as far right as you want to go. And the reason that's important is this entire system runs on the idea that if you keep going far enough one direction, you'll just eventually find the resources you want. So, for example, this thing here is just going to head out and goes right. And it just keeps going right. It goes right until it finds a resource patch. There is no alternative. What are you? You're going to the iron outpost. I don't even know how close that is. It's probably not that far away. There's an iron outpost there. Coal outpost. Copper. There's oil. Stone outposts. Second iron outpost. And you just keep going. It doesn't matter how far you go. You can always get there. I think I put in yes. I definitely put in a turn system here so that they could go back all the way around if they needed to. This here is the junction intersection. You see, this is basically a circular loop. They come out, they go around, they come straight down and back across. They can't go, no trains can go back this way. They all go out one route across the top of the map and come back the bottom. And the reason there's 3 rails here is just in case, say, this guy's coming along here, he's about to pass the section and another train comes out and blocks him. He can just chicane around them. You don't want any slowdown. The theory is you want to keep as many trains moving along the top here. Like, look at that. They are just lined up like rockets coming out of there. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Oh, and for loading, we have beacon bot mining. Yeah, these things, we had to actually bend the rails for loading because there's just too much. There's too much loading to be done and the trains are too big. This is the only way to keep them close enough to each other that the loading can happen properly. And for these things here, we have, speed modules and more speed modules. Productivity-wise, it all comes down to the mining bonus, which is something ridiculous. This version is so old, it's still got the little infinity symbol there. Coming back towards the center of the base, we have this sort of weird flower-looking thing where everything comes in, queues up, and then goes into their locations. The whole reason for this was it kind of looked cool. Like, from a distance, it looks quite nice having them all queued up like that. The center is where oil goes, and then this is a mirror. Iron on the outside because it's the most used in this version. Copper on the inside, then coal, then stone because stone is the least used, iron is the most. And then oil in the center, which goes right up here and feeds into the oil systems on either side. These oil wells, like this chunk here, this chunk from here to here, this only feeds this section over here. These are all replicas. So this feeds one chunk, this feeds another chunk. six independent oil sections. Well, they're maybe connected a little bit. And what I tried to do with these, see these trains leaving here? Let's see if I can figure it out. Okay. That train pulls in and stops. That's fine. Now, watch when it gets ready to start. This one over here starts up. Then this one down here starts up. Then this one over here. Then this one over here. Then this one. Then this one. And then we come back over here. And then this one starts up again. That was manually timed. I had to actually go in, put trains blocking the tracks and remove them manually because I didn't understand the circuits at the time to actually automate that. But the reason I did this was I wanted all the trains staggered so none of them stopped all at the same time. If you had all 6 of these lanes with all of them moving all perfectly in sync with each other, which would probably look really cool, the problem would be you'd have all of the trains stopping at the same time, all of the logistics drones activating at the same time, and it would cause more lag. So by spreading out the load, it spread out the drain on the game. But also results in these really cool patterns. A few small side concerns. The uranium that powers the base, as in powers all the trains, it's brought in here, dumped onto this transport belt, and all of that uranium gets dumped all the way along here, goes all the way to the end, and then it gets fed sideways. Well, actually, wait, there's 2 ways it gets done. One, it gets fed into a passive provider chest here, and if you check on the map, this entire area is one logistics network. So all of that uranium is accessed here. There's another transport belt that goes across to this area and feeds it into that logistics network. And these bases here have all have their own nuclear fuel production built in. So the uranium gets fed into them, and all the fuel for all the trains is built on site. I really like that because it means the whole thing just works. Oh, that does leave one weakness to the system, though. We're bringing in resources here. This is necessary to keep the whole system running, which I didn't really like at the time, but I didn't want to have a whole separate train for uranium plugged into the system. To cover one of the major downsides, if you're the type of person who gets run over by trains a lot, you will hate this base. Though I must admit, I got really good at not getting run over. Like, when there's this many trains around, you're never not paying attention. You just know there's a train every few seconds, and you're like, okay, yeah, we're going to go across now. Like, there's one over there. You've got eyes in the back of your head. I can't remember the last time I got run over in this station. It doesn't happen. Come join me here on a little bit of a hypothetical. See, each one of these bases is independent. So everything from this rail up here down to this rail here is just a single base. It produces about 420 or 425 science per minute, but it can also churn out whatever you want. Can you imagine if you just put this down and then fed it with 4 trains off a normal train network? You should have 4 stops, one for iron, copper, coal, stone. You might have to ship in something else like here and there. But by and large, you could get by with just having this as a stampable down module, plug it into a train network, and there you go, 425 science per minute done. The benefit of stamping down little bases like this would be basically the siphon, that mall over there. I worked at it one time. It can produce all of the necessary resources to replicate itself, modules and all, in under 8 hours. So, or was it 6? Whatever. Let's say it's 8 hours. So in 8 hours, it can produce enough because you can siphon all the resources out of it. So in 8 hours, you could build a complete duplicate of this base. And then in you'd have 2 of them then. So in 4 hours, you could build a 3rd module. And then in about 3 hours or something like that, going down and down. So effectively, you could just stamp one down, plug in the trains, let it go. Copy paste, very stampable, very programmable, and then it also allows you to just pull out whatever you want. This thing can produce black science, regular science, all the science. It produces all the sciences, you don't have to care. Downsides, it will never be as efficient as a base that's designed to be like perfectly FPS efficient, but stampability wise, this is why I loved it. I think this is this is probably why I quit playing after it. Okay, that and probably the amount of hour plays. It's like I just looked at this base and went, this does everything I wanted to do. It's perfectly expandable. It allows me to convert all my resources from one way to another. It just seemed beautiful. If I was ever going to make another base, I would probably just do little modules like this. And then that got me wondering, would it be possible to say, just say you only had the low-level tech, you didn't have any access to roboports, and you just had coal. Could you make coal trains and using transport belts make a little base? Like, could you make a smelter setup built off of this sort of system? In other words, you'd start out and you'd put down the entire train line. You'd put all the train lines down, full length, for what it's going to be like when it's finished. But then for the smelting section here, you'd have to come up with a smelting system that could work with the trains, but would only be able to use transport belts and inserters and stuff like that. And then you have to work inside the space to make some sort of smelting system that could then feed back onto the trains. It would be hella difficult, but it'd be a great way to be able to level up. So you'd start off with coal, you'd be using this transport thing, but it'd be very slow because these trains would be a lot slower with coal. Then you get upgraded to petroleum fuel. So petroleum fuel would allow the trains to go faster, which would allow your whole system to run faster. Then you'd probably have to upgrade your smelting setup. And then once you get logistics robots, you can then rip out all that stuff and switch over to a logistics network. That was sort of the goal I wanted to go for at the end, was make a stampable modular setup that you could basically just stamp it all down with transport belts at the start and then upgrade as you went along, as you unlocked more tech, until eventually you were just left with this system. Never got around to it, though. Now, I know I have gushed about all of the advantages of this system, but there's a reason no one builds these things. They're incredibly difficult to figure out how to make, and even when you do make them, they're let's put it this way. Just say you want to put some iron ore on the grid. Well, what you got to do is assign cargo wagon space for it. Then you got to figure out how many inserters you're going to need to put that much on, because these trains only stop for a limited amount of time, meaning you got to count how many inserter activations they can get. Sometimes they can get an even number, sometimes they can get an odd number. Then it depends on how much what's the level of the inserters. But even assuming you've maxed out all your tech, you still got to do a whole bunch of math. It's like there's hours of just figuring out how am I going to squeeze all the different things I want. And then it's like you'll see there's 3 science things in here, but then on another one we've got some sulfuric acid in barrels, we've got lubricant in other ones because we need that lubricant for something else. All of this stuff has to be memorized, and if you want to change anything, well, good luck. You got to remember everything else is. Like there's 4 spaces in that wagon. Also, there's 4 spaces on the other wagon. But sometimes there's non-symmetrical stuff, like I might have something on one wagon that's not on the other one. 3 spaces on that. So there is a space left on this to maybe expand a bit here and there. But even then, just say you do put on the iron ore, you then have to remember what wagons the iron ore is on and how many inserters it takes to pull out the prerequisite amount. It's like there is spreadsheets upon spreadsheets to make this whole thing work. And when it's finished, it's a beauty. It's an absolute beauty. But trying to actually make it, it's a nightmare for people who don't like spreadsheets. For me, it was beautiful. I'll link the save game file in the description if you want to play around with it, though you will have to downgrade Factorio to 0.16.51. I don't even know how old that is, but it's a hella old. This would not work in the modern age because a whole bunch of the recipes have changed and things would break down. But, yeah. This is what I was doing before I started playing Oxygen Not Included. I kind of missed this base. It was really, really long and time-consuming to construct, but I enjoyed every minute of it. Oh look, the solar panels are already done. Yeah, I remember now. The deployment of these things, we couldn't keep up with the deployment. I had to make multiple solar deployment areas. As well as that, I somehow missed a small worm over here, and it wasn't automated at the time to destroy cliffs. You now have to go out. You had to manually go and destroy your cliffs yourself. So you couldn't do it with bots back then. Things were dark. Those were dark, dark days. Oh, and it's also configured this. It took a while, but this is configured so that you can selectively deconstruct the roboports from the outside in so that you can strip out all the roboports and the radars from this, which is why all of these areas over here are dark and roboportless. Yeah, there was way too much effort that went into that. I'll link the blueprints for that in the description as well, just in case you want them. I'm going to cut this out here and leave you with the soothing sounds of industry. I hope you enjoyed, and good luck.